Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have our two lovely guests, Cristian, who is an INFP, and Alexa, who is an ENFP, and I'll have their Twitter links down below. And today we'll talk about ENFP versus INFP. So Cristian, would you like to give us a few of your thoughts?
Sure. I think one of the biggest differences that I've noticed with INFPs, just ones that I know in real life, but also just on Twitter that I've interacted, is a lot of them seem to be more, I don't know, they seem to be more like assertive and confident. They seem to like just do things and not necessarily really care. They don't care about being silly or just being random. And that is definitely not, which is so great, because they bring like an exuberance to like whatever they're doing. But like that's definitely not me. Like I will like kind of observe first, and then I have to trust you or the environment, and then I can open up a little bit. But I don't have the confident assertiveness that I noticed that ENFPs do, which is, I wish I had that. But that's not usually how I am. So that's like one of the biggest differences that I've noticed.
Yeah, I'd honestly agree with that. I know not that INFPs are awkward per se, but at least the ones I've met, they seem to just, maybe it's because we're so similar that's how we just get each other. But for me, I agree. I think that ENFPs can show up with more like enthusiastic, kind of like take charge nature, whereas INFP is kind of more recluse to that and observes what's going on. I think for us, it's still like a feeling function or way of kind of seeing like, where do I fit here? And ENFPs are more extroverted that way. They're like, here, blah, take me as I am.
Right.
I'm going to sit back and watch how they interact first and see if, I have a place here.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like one of my ENFP coworkers, he even said like in my body language, it's more like, it was more kind of like inward.
Yeah.
And so he was like, sit your shoulders back, man. Just, like kind of, and I was just like, I was like, okay, like,
Yeah.
So it's even like, I guess, a physical thing too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Introverts tend to have like more introverted mannerisms, while extroverts have more open mannerism.
Exactly.
Do you have any differences that come to mind, Alexa?
I feel like, at least with the INFPs that I know, a really good friend of mine, when we talk, it's like they'll talk and talk and talk about a specific, like a feeling or something that's happened to them, and they get really, really into that one thing with their FI, I think it is. Whereas I'm like, I get to a certain point where I'm kind of like, okay, I check out a little bit, and then I'm just like, well, as much as I can appreciate what they're saying, like I want the next thing to come up. I think that's more of the NE fighting to want to, go past what their FI is saying, which makes sense because they're dominant FI. And honestly, it's not that ENFPs don't appreciate the depth of their FI. I really feel like INFPs are able to bring a really nice sense of understanding to these relationships, and ENFPs do too. I just feel like for an INFP, they're more grounded in that, whereas we're more flighty. I don't know if that makes sense. It's not that we don't want to sit in that, but I think there's just so much more going on in our minds.
Yeah, no, like I've noticed the exact same thing. That was like another thing difference that I was gonna bring up, is that I think it's actually has to do with both FI and SI. So like I've noticed that like when I really like something, or like when I'm in a feeling, like I really want to like SI observe all the details, and then I want to go FI like in depth about everything. And ENFPs after a certain point, like you said, are kind of like, okay, like I kind of want to move to the next topic. And I think that like the inferior SI does not anchor the ENFP as much, whereas like with my tertiary SI, it anchors me, it grounds me a lot more. So I'm more comfortable like going more in depth with like whatever I'm talking about. So yeah, I've noticed that like after a certain point, they like want to like move on to another topic. So, and which is it's not a bad thing. Like I don't take it personally, but sometimes it like when I do want to really talk about something, it's like, wait, no, can we like stay with this for a little bit?
At least in that moment, right? And I know we do, because there's that element of we both want to feel seen and heard.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's why I've made it a point to be like, okay, before this, like if you're not hearing what they're saying, I will like interject or be like, you know, I get this and I want to hold space for this, but if I can't, I need to be quite honest with it, because I value that too with my INFP friends, right?
Absolutely.
And it's nice because the INFP just wants to connect, and then I realize, well, we have that shared kind of value, right, of wanting that connection. So instead of just like, you know, jumping in with like a new thing or making it about me, I want to actually respond to the INFP and be like, oh, like I hear what you're saying, and
yes, absolutely.
demonstrate about me kind of thing. Like you really
Yeah.
hear what they're saying as opposed to just jumping out of it.
I do like I value, like, especially people I'm really close to, like I value their opinions because, you know, I like me at first of all, like I think it serves two functions. So first, I think that the wanting to hear like what the ENFP is saying, like I want to be validated and like see like I'm seen and understood, like that. Obviously it's very important to me, but also too, like hearing the thoughts from like an ENFP, their thoughts on like what I'm feeling or talking about, like it helps create a deeper connection with them. So because I can understand their thought process more, and then it develops a sense of trust for me. So that's what's important. And I see that you picked that up, which is like really awesome.
Yeah, I feel that too. I definitely can relate to that because I feel the most seen, if anything, from an INFP perspective. Like if I need someone to hold space for me, you know, that's the type of person I want to go to. So on the contrary, I think not that I owe them that back, but that I should reciprocate that back, right? Because that's part of that bond, right? And I'm like, if they're doing that for me, the least I can do is give them space to do the same thing. And I really feel like in a group of people or in a sea of people, like they're gonna kind of come towards us and gravitate towards us. And then part of me is like, oh, that's so cute, you know? And you do see that. And,
it's true.
I'm doing a lot better than what I used to, just holding space for it. Yeah.
I love that. It's funny because I do like, it's funny because in different jobs that I've had, there are certain people that I gravitate towards, and whenever I type them or have them like take a typing test, they tend to be ENFPs or INFPs if they're not as many. There's more ENFPs that I've run into, but like I tend to just naturally gravitate towards them.
That's fascinating. So I'm hearing a bit of a few themes here. So with like we talked about how INFPs, they're really good at holding space for people, and it has a lot to do with their superpower, which is listening. So in their brain scans, what lights up is the listening regions of their brain. Whereas like with ENFPs, something very interesting about them is like when you look at Alexa's Twitter, you'll see her having these really interesting, odd, quirky ideas, like about, for example, attachment theory, and she's like, so if an anxious avoidant, or like you had tweets about, wait, I just want to pull it up to show people, or like to talk about it. You talked about could you
like, you know, if you have it's about that connection factor of like, if you have, you know, an avoidant attachment or an anxious attachment, let's say you're an anxious attachment in relationships with people, maybe it's because in reverse you're avoidant with yourself. And so I kind of made that distinction, and I was like, I wonder if that's actually a thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like what's great with the powers of ENFP and INFP together is that when you pair that up with the listening component and the brainstorming component, you really get this unique way of problem solving that's very different from like a TIT perspective.
Absolutely.
I really like that.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I feel like ENFPs are a little more assertive. So like because they have TE higher up, what happens is they're more proactive with organizing and ordering, like giving commands, or like they're more they have a TE-ness to them. Like sometimes when you talk to an ENFP, they'll kind of hit you with that TE, and they can seem kind of like it's stronger than it is. But in some of them, whereas like for INFPs, I've never had that confusion, like, whoa, that is strong TE. Like normally, when you get strong TE from like an NFP, it tends to be an ENFP.
Yeah, unless like we're in our us INFPs in our grip state, but that takes
Yes.
us, like, we have to be really pushed though. But yeah, like, so like my sister being an ENFP, like you really feel her TE a lot. She can be very forceful with it. So very assertive.
Yeah. Some ENFPs like regularly use their TE too. Like
Mhm.
when they talk and they see a point of like speculating more, like there's a relentless questioning aspect to some ENFPs. So if they see a hole in what you're saying, they'll like TE like any jump on it, and they'll go like, wait, it doesn't make sense here. And it'll seem more abrasive than an INFP would do it.
That's my sister is, I love her to death, but she's exactly that way. She'll be like, wait, like that doesn't make sense. Like, what do you mean this? What do you mean that? Like, you just said this here, and like that, and then now you're saying this. Like, what do you? And I'm like, you know, like, wait, let me think, let me process that for a minute, you know, and then I'll respond.
Then it's like the INFP gets to their workstation and they're midway through this and they go, oh shit, I didn't consider that. And then they go, what am I supposed to do? And can I even ask this question now?
I know. I hate that.
It's like, I got you.
I know. It's just like, I think of these things like so much later. And I'm like, well, now like the moment's passed, you know? So like, that's so funny.
I think I'm more curious with the SI component and how it's more prevalent for you, because you said there's that groundedness, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you, I almost want to know more about that with it being my last function, how that shows up for you, because I see moments of this and glimpses, but it's not as, you know, it's not as prevalent in my life, I guess.
So I think the way it shows up for me is in a couple ways. So I think that it shows up more in like the grounding, like I said. So I'm more comfortable sitting with ideas or topics or feelings much more than an ENFP is. So yeah. So I mean, we were, you know, discussing this earlier in the differences in when ENFPs and INFPs have conversations where we want to go a little bit more in depth, and sometimes you guys kind of want to move on. The other thing I think is this. I think the SI ties into our idealism. Mm-hmm. So I've heard Michael Pierce say that like tertiary SI for INPs, like it's concerned about like categorizing and like the perfect ideal of what something is, whether that be a TI system or whether that be an FI value system. Like there's a concern for like really like concretizing and making it the perfect embodiment of whatever it is that you're analyzing. And so then that like creates the perfectionism that and the idealism that we can be known for. And then the other way that it shows up is in like FI-SI looping, or so like we tend to like have obsessive thoughts sometimes about like our feelings and like way overanalyze them in like excruciating detail. And then also like the nostalgia factor. So there are places that like hold so much like nostalgic meaning for us. Like for me, like going to the beach or like being in a library, like those are my safe spaces that I like to return to when I need to feel like an inner sense of calm and peace. So like that's a very like SI thing, because like there's a sentiment, emotional sentiment attached to those places or objects or experiences.
Yeah, so another difference between INFP and ENFP is INFPs are more likely to overanalyze their self-experience, like when they're in the presence of other people too. Whereas like I notice when ENFPs, especially when they're in the presence of other people, will focus more on the other person. So sometimes like ENFPs, because they have NE, they'll want like new from another person. So they're like, so what does this other person think about this new thing? And you'll bring it to the table. Whereas INFPs, when I talk to them one-on-one, sometimes they'll talk about themselves more, or like you'll hear more self-language, whereas the ENFP will focus more on you.
Yes, where it's like the ENFP will do that, or will be like more self-referencing, and we'll talk about ourselves more, because I think like that's how we process information, is like filtering it through our like SI experience.
That's true. I feel like for me, the way SI shows up, I mean, it always kind of, it's like a complete backseat version of the thing that wants to always check in, that you just completely ignore. You're like, you don't exist. But when it does come up, it's like I'll relive experiences, or at least it's like you mentioned the idealism, right? So it's like you can be in a moment with someone. So if you and I were dating and we went to the movies together and then went on a walk and did all these nice things, I feel like SI is really good at picking those things that are nostalgic, that you really want to look back on and remember as a good moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so have we broken up or something, that's when all those memories kick in of all those good things. So part of it's just like, ew, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's like, great. Like I've relived moments where I'm better at these things in my mind than I am in real life, like with sports even.
Yeah.
It's like, in real life, I'm not actually that good, but in my mind, I can like create this like world where I'm like scoring tries and doing all these cool things that like SE users do that I really don't do. And that's such an SI thing. And I remember one time it showed up for me where I was walking through a store and I caught a whiff of this perfume that I was familiar with. I believe I've mentioned this story before, and it hit me. I was like, I've smelled this before. And those kinds of things never really happen to me, but when they do, they're so profound and so like real. And it's like, that's crazy. And I knew instantly what the bottle looked like. I knew where it was from, like who wore it, and it was someone that was special to me. So it's interesting how SI will remember those little details. I always say to people, I'll remember like your favorite pack of gum, but I will not remember like your, so-and-so's name or like, what you did last week. But it's like those little moments. And in a way, I kind of like appreciate that more because it's more thoughtful.
Absolutely. Sense is connected to memory. But like what's interesting is like where maybe for you, like those memories might be triggered after a certain moment, like let's say after breakup. Like for me, they can recur, like they can happen like almost at any time. Or like I will like induce myself to feel those feelings, like my FI is feeling a certain way, so then I will induce myself to go into an SI similar experience, so that way I can feel that feeling.
That's very interesting, especially that you're a type 4 in the Enneagram.
Yes.
So that's almost something that's a priority.
Yeah, because like
something that's like
Type 4s are known as like the nostalgic type and the romantic. So they're always kind of like in the past almost. That's very much, it can be nice, but a lot of times it can be torturous. Especially when it's like the painful feelings that just keep like gnawing at you and you just can't, like, this is where like the FI-SI loops start happening and you can't get out of those feelings. And it's hard to like, like that's why sometimes when I know I've actually become self-aware enough to know that when I get in my FI-SI loops, I will reach out to like Kate. So because she's an ENFP, so that way she can NE for me, so to help me see other possibilities, because I'm so stuck in just one, like overanalyzing one thing. So that's like that's actually a wonderful thing about ENFPs for an INFP at least, is that you guys can help us get unstuck in those loops, because you guys can help us see other perspectives that we might have not considered, and then that brings me like a sense of calm, like, oh, okay, I didn't think about that.
But it's like the INFP does that for us about just getting real about that specific feeling. And then they're so empathetic about it. They're like, hey, like, if you feel this way, it's okay. Like, they're valid feelings. And they go, like, you're okay to sit in that. And you feel the same kind of way you feel when you speak with Kate.
Yeah, and like it's so funny because I've noticed that like not just ENFPs but other types will say like, oh, like, I feel this way, and like I know that's wrong to feel that way, or no, that's weird or whatever. I'm like, no, like that is such a normal thing to feel, and I'm just really surprised sometimes at how much people like invalidate their own feelings, and it's like, you're not a crazy person, like it's okay to feel those things. Maybe like the response from those feelings is maybe not like the best thing, but like the feelings in and of themselves like are okay to feel.
Yeah, for sure. And so another difference between INFP and ENFP is INFPs, like, okay, so everything acts in service to your dominant function. So when INFPs use TE, it's to defend some sort of FI belief that they have. So they use TE primarily for the service of an FI reason, but but ENFPs use TE just because, so they'll use it more, like without it being tied to their FI. So ENFPs are more just generally TE, and it's not tied to an FI reason to be TE. So that's another reason you'll find.
That's absolutely true. I think, like for me specifically, but I think other INFPs that I'm friends with have expressed this. I think there's such a stigma around like having feelings that, or being like an FI dominant, or I guess a feeling dominant, that like they're like, you're seen as like not logical or rational. Mm-hmm. So like I think we develop an insecurity with that. So we feel that we have to have TE, like empirical evidence saying like, no, like we're actually like logical and rational in what we're saying. So like I will use, and even if it's just like if I'm not expressing an emotional value or feeling, even if it's just like I'm expressing like a fact or something, like I'm making an argument, I'm much more inclined to pull in TE because I'm insecure about like that I'm, correct, and I'm not as confident in like my own logic. So I'll definitely pull from like outside empirical sources, like this study says this and this study says that, to support what I'm saying, where I'm like, no, I'm right, like listen to me, like I promise.
Yeah, everything is in support of that dominant function. So the TE will be like a little like just an assistant to the FI. And if you pay attention enough, you'll realize the motive of that person, and you'll be able to differentiate if they're an INFP or an ENFP.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't just randomly like do TE.
Yeah. So what is both of your tolerances for monotony? So like doing things that are repetitive and like mundane. Like what is the tolerance level of both of your?
For me, I feel like, for instance, like the job that I do now, looking and tracking like online stuff and being kind of very like, it's more TE like flex for me. I like it because I get to, it's kind of funny because your FI can enjoy it if it's something that you like about the job, but it's like at the same time, I get to like really jump into my tertiary function and just produce and be efficient. And then at the same time though, it's like your brain can get very overwhelmed and crash easily. And I feel like the more I devote to like mundane tasks, it's very draining to me. And if it's something that I'm not overly excited about, that's when it becomes very, like I do anything to make it fun, or I find ways to make it fun, or get some kind of reward out of it. So it's like, because if not, it has to be done, right? Your TE's like, this has to get done. So you do it. And I feel like for me, I work in bursts too, right? So I can't always be consistent with the mundane things, but when I have that burst of like energy to work towards it, whether it's creative or not, I can devote the time to do it and get it done.
Yeah. So like for me, like it might be a little bit different from me personally, not only because I'm an INFP, but I have diagnosed ADHD. So like it's significantly harder for me to do like maintain focus and attraction to doing like really mundane tasks. So I have like a very low threshold tolerance for mundane tasks. And also too, like, I think it's also some like weird, like maybe it's a foreign me also, but like it's like this weird, like it's like this overly dramatic like existential crisis type thing where I'm like, I hate my life doing this job, this is so awful, like I can't stand this anymore, like like I want to quit. Like, so instead of like activating my NE to like try and find other like perspectives or possibilities to make it interesting, like I will like wallow in this like existential dread, like, is this my life? I hate this, I'm not passionate about this, so it's very, it's a little different probably. for me.
Yeah. So it's interesting because like Christian talks about the concept of like ADHD and having it. I noticed there's a correlation, like there's a trend between ADHD and the use of SE or NE, so extroverted sensing or extroverted intuition. It's just a trend. Anyone can have it, but you know, there's probably a reason behind that. And the reason behind that might be because like those two functions are always seeking variety, and what will happen is that it can cause it to like correlate with things that are about seeking variety and needing stimulation.
Absolutely.
Cool. And so Christian talks about like how confronted with something that gives him an existential crisis, he's more likely to wallow about it. So it's turning everything into an FI thing. So like FI will turn everything into an FI thing. Whereas like the ENFP will go like, how do I put like a bright spin on this? Or like, how do I, they'll try to like look for that, like, ooh, how do I just pizzazz it? So they're less about, like, they won't default to FI, but the INFP may default to FI more often.
Absolutely.
That's exactly it. And I would describe that similar loop for me as not knowing what my next step is and how that drives me crazy. Because I can't formulate like the possibility of what to do next. And my TE is like, well, you need to know what to do. That's like why I think a lot of NFs in general have a hard time choosing careers or like things they like to do. Because like, well, you know, if I wanted to be like a nurse, I know step by step what I have to do that. But there's other things where if you want to bring the passion and the vitality to that career that you want, you know, you have those things, those qualities. So you search for them elsewhere. But when you don't know what your next step is to obtain whatever that big vision is for the future, that's what causes that crisis for me. And then you get stuck in that loop of like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what do I do? I'm stuck here.
Yep, absolutely. I think it's hard because like, you know that like, so I've like changed career decisions a couple times already. Like I've settled on professor, but you know, that could change too. But like, what's hard is like, especially for me to not like idealize. And that's something I had to really do. Like when I was researching being a college professor, when that was something that I was like deciding maybe that's the career path I want to take, I had to like get really real about it. Because I know that I can idealize things, and then it's like, it's always such a disappointment. And because I don't have realistic expectations. So, you know, so sometimes like it's hard to try and like balance the fact that like not everything is going to be perfect and how I imagine it in my mind, and just like learning to accept like some of the more practical things, you know, practical realities of any type of job, and just, you know, focus on, you know, the good aspects of it. And like, you know, even if like only a certain aspect of it is even if it's just like I guess a smaller percentage that fits your ideal, but if it's something you're really passionate about, then you know, then you do it, you know, and then you just learn how to deal with and tolerate like the other day-to-day stuff that might not fit the really cool stuff that you want to do, you know?
Exactly. Or keeping it in that box of like, this is the only thing I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Like knowing you do have the variety and option of changing your mind at any time.
Exactly.
And I feel like we get in that, like we make that our reality when that's not the case. We can always change our mind. So it's nice that way. And I know that is a type 7. Like a lot of the time people think we're like flighty, and probably ENFPs too, but it's like, we just have this zest for life where we are wanting new experiences, and new experiences are what make us have more knowledge and power in the world, I think. So, and that's what brings kind of more of our personality to light.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess another difference between ENFP and INFP is that ENFPs, they normally typically default to FI when they've exhausted all the NE possibilities. So like when every avenue of what if, like they've tried it and it hasn't worked, that's when they get like FI depressed. But it's not until that happens that they tend to get depressed. Or if they're abused, but like that's a different story.
And if you don't pass the mic over to your FI sometimes, that can be depressing. I've noticed that, because sometimes like you are faced with a situation, and I know in my life that's what affects me, is when I'm faced with a situation, I consider all the possibilities, if I act on that FI value, and then if I choose to, just not execute it because of whatever reason, sometimes FIs will like I don't feel heard right now. And that's when you go find your INFP friend and go, I should say this to this person, but they're not worth it, so I'm going to tell you instead. And you guys just have this amazing cry together and like talk about it. So
Yes.
that's really how it goes. Because sometimes like that pride takes into where you're like, you know what? We're not going to do that. That's just going to cause a bigger mess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's true. I think it has to do with the kind of like how extroverted functions and introverted functions work, whereas like it's not always the case, but I guess more often like the dominant extrovert will do first, then reflect, whereas like we reflect and then do.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. ENFPs, like they're more likely to either externalize than internalize. So that's another differentiation between an introvert and an extrovert. Because introverts tend to lean more heavily on their introverted functions, they're more likely to internalize, and extroverts, because they lean more on their extroverted functions, tend to externalize. So you'll see this like just this in general too.
No, I totally relate to that. Like I think this is why like ENFPs can be really sensitive too, but I think INFPs even more so, because we like attach everything to our FI. So like everything has like a personalized meaning. And so like, if we express something, a feeling or a thought, and like somebody like maybe disagrees with it, and it can be really nice too. Like sometimes, especially if you're a little bit more unhealthy, like we like totally internalize that and personalize that. Oh, they don't like me, and it's not really that. It just maybe they don't like the idea or don't necessarily agree with it, but it has nothing to do with you specifically. But because we associate the idea as being generated from us and from our being and our identity, then we have like a very strong personal attachment to it. So like this has been like really the difficult thing for me as I've gotten older, is to try and like unlearn all of the things that I've like internalized. So like, because that's what happens is like anytime somebody's ever criticized me or said something, that really hurt me, it's like then I retreat inward and I just kind of like withdraw and like shut down, and then I start like really internalizing everything. And then this is also especially true for fours. They do something called introjection, where like they take whatever like somebody else is saying and then they like internalize it. It's I guess the process is described as like kind of swallowing the other person whole and then kind of like making it part of you, so that way you can have some sort of control over it, which is like I guess the opposite of projection. So yeah, I definitely like do that a lot more.
Yes, and that brings up a really interesting point. So INFPs lead with a strong personal attachment or like an emotional signature on things, whereas the ENFP, you have to work your way into their FI. So me and Alexa have an episode together called the ENFP and EFI heart, and like basically like the ENFP has a heart that they have broadly for everyone, and then they have the FI heart for a select few people. But when you're there, and no matter the circumstance, no matter where you are physically, they'll still love you in their heart emotionally in the long term. But to get that strong personal attachment from an ENFP, you have to like get past their detachment. So because like ENFPs lead with an OE function, so NE, this causes like an objectivity or even a detachment generally. So to get to their FI, it has to get through that. So ENFPs have that side, but there's it's not readily apparent. And if you think that it's apparent, it's probably not. They're just putting on the friendly facade that makes people think that they're like closer than they are by mistake. But it's just like ENFPs can love everyone, but they only FI have that place for the people that they let in.
Oh, that's really interesting.
It makes you wonder if INFPs then lead with their FI heart, and then their NE heart is like secondary to that. So they're only maybe in a healthy capacity. So if it's unhealthy, it's like they're feeling that validation of themselves through this idealistic nature. Otherwise, maybe it's just all about maintaining and producing and getting connections that are only meant for that space. Not that there's a lot of them, but that's their main priority. Whereas for me, it's just like it's secondary because it's almost like an instinctual variant, right? Like if I'm social sexual, that's a secondary area for me. So I almost would see it as a variant stacking of like, I lead that way, and I I carry an importance for those deep relationships, but I'm not outwardly seeking them all the time.
Ooh, that's so interesting. So like I'm definitely seeking the deep relationships.
Yeah.
And so that's hard because not everybody wants to go there, you know? And so like it's very difficult for me to have like, I mean, I do have them. I do have like more casual friendships, but like I don't place as much of a priority on them. So like on those types of relationships. Yeah, I just really, and it's hard too, because it's like, it's an almost an exhausting sorting process of like, okay, like, you know, like I'm going to observe this person and I'm going to poke a little bit to see if I can trust them and if I can go a little bit deeper. So there's this whole vetting process that I can't just like I will initially, so that it's such an interesting process, I think. So like INFPs are like children. So, you know, we have these, and I want to get actually into the similarity between INFPs and ENFPs. We have a childlike presence about us, but INFPs are very are like children. We have these like little FI crushes on people. So like, so just like there's somebody, there's an energy or something that attracts us to somebody. So then like we go in very cautiously, and so we kind of like poke and prod to see like, okay, can I trust this person, and can this person like will they go deep with me?
Yeah.
And so like, and then so we'll you know, go through this vetting process, and then if it doesn't pass, then we'll kind of like, all right, then we move on. But it's not like we're like open and then we whittle down. It's like we kind of start off like selective, and
that's interesting.
You know, yeah.
Whereas it's the opposite for me. I start off as like, I don't really have a concern for like, I don't have a vetting process per se of like if we're going to be close or not, but you are close, you like aren't close and then you are. Whereas yours, like you're close and then you're there, right?
Yeah.
I think, if that makes sense. It's interesting because I think it's more on like an acquaintance level for me in the beginning, and then I find out like I never instantly have a crush on a person. Like when I observe them online, I might be like intrigued, like intrigued, and be like, "Ooh, there could be a possibility that I might like them romantically."
Yeah.
Whereas you guys might just be like, "Oh, her tweets make me love her."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, it's just like it's such a hard thing to like explain, just like kind of the feeling, or it can even just be like not even just like a crush thing. It could even be like oh, this person like has this energy that really like draws me to them, you know, like because I feel like a kindred spirit with them. So like I get very giddy and I'm like, oh, like I want to like, you know, so like, oh, like you kind of latch on a little bit and see then if, you know, then you go through the vetting process and see if they'll want to go deep with you. But if not, then, you know, then we kind of like, all right, we just don't, it's hard. I don't know. I just don't care for like having just acquaintances just to have if I'm bored and be like, oh, I haven't spoken to this person in a while, like let me call them up.
Yeah, so I guess what this shows is that ENFPs, an ENFP's priority is not discriminating options too quickly. So making sure you keep your options open until a person actually shows that you should not have them. So they're not, but the INFP will lead with personal preference. So it'll be like, wow, you know, does this strike my FI? Or like they're more selective because it'll things are more likely to like hit an INFP's FI because it's their first slot. So they have to be more careful. But an ENFP's like, not investing in that yet, so it's easier. Also, another way to tell apart ENFP and INFP is through vocal tone. So like throughout this interview, I think like Alexa has a TE-ish quality to her voice. So TE users, people who use TE, you'll hear like a slight bluntness to their voice, like and you'll hear it, but with Christian's tone, you don't hear it. And okay, I will preface this as visual typing is a bad way of typing. Everyone who has come through my typing service and has been typed by a visual typer has been typed incorrectly. Yeah. But I will say there's truth to this because I can very obviously hear the TE in Alexa's voice. But
It's interesting.
Yeah, the reason why Alexa is not a TE auxiliary or driver is because of like a lot of reasons, but also the background noise in this video. So every TE user who has been either first or second TE has had completely silent black background noise. No phone going off, no nothing. Because TE knows how to socially engineer an environment that is most efficient for a video. And they'll do it beforehand. They'll have everything set up. During my 5
beforehand. But I
don't even that like those thoughts like never even crossed my mind. I would never even think to do that.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Oh
yeah.
That's true too. Like I went out of my way to make sure my setup was good. That's why I'm like, Joyce, I have until this time because I know people are going to be coming over and then it's going to be loud in here and then I can't be on video.
That's so funny.
Because I take that seriously, right? Like I take these conversations seriously. Like I want to invest in them and be a part of them as long as there isn't those distractions, but they're out of my control too. So.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. I think there's definitely like in those kinds of areas, I think there's a certain aloofness for INFPs where we're just like, what? You know, like we don't pay attention to those things.
Right.
I wanted to actually say one more difference that I noticed because that I thought of from what you said, based on what you said. Because we like INFPs are a judging dominant type, like we're cool with like any possibilities, but at some point we want to come to a conclusion and a judgment. We don't want to leave open possibilities forever, because like we want to like concretize or solidify like a value or a feeling or whatever the case is, so that way it's like it becomes part of like who we are. So we're not going to like keep possibilities open as long as like an any dom or as long as an ENFP.
I'd agree with that. I feel like we'd rather keep the option open as opposed to accepting the harsh one. Sometimes. Yeah,
I think it's also because sometimes ENFPs can be so external world focused, they don't actually know if that like if something they want to take out of their life. So sometimes it takes longer for that to sink in because they're looking at the possibilities. They're not looking to close them. And what happens is that it causes a self-neglect sometimes in the ENFP where they're like, ooh, should have closed that opportunity way sooner than I did.
That's true.
In there.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yes.
But like going to similarities, I think both ENFPs and INFPs have like this childlike wonder for the world, an intense curiosity. So it's not, I like how, again, Michael Pierce, I love his stuff, but like he makes a distinction between childish, like being immature, and childlike. And so like we just have an internal childlike spirit, like this, again, this wide-eyed wonder for like just the world, how a child sees everything, like everything is new to them. And so they have this intense curiosity to just kind of question things and to try things and just everything just seems so exciting. And before kind of like the darkness of TE reality comes imposing in on you or closing in on you as you become an adult. But like, we still like have that within us that we don't want that fire kind of to like be snuffed out. We still want to like keep that open. And so you just kind of see it in just like these little ways. Like I said, for me, like getting these little attachments or crushes to people, or with the ENFP just having just kind of just being out in the world and just like trying new things, and everything seems possible, So I love that aspect of us, because I feel like maybe in other types like that stuff gets lost. And I think it's a crucial like aspect to have, like, to maintain that inner child.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And that's part of a value function too, of just no matter what happens to us in our lives, that we're not going to let the negative stuff alter our perception of the world, because we do see the good in all things. And but that's the thing. A lot of the time I think people look at us and they go, oh, you know, I would never want to have those qualities because of like just the negative connotations that surround them. But I'm like, at the same time, if you want to be around a person who's going to accept you for who you really are, to see all those shades and still appreciate them, and also show you where your potential lies, and really just shine a light on that and love you for who you are. Again, not that other types are not able to do this, but this is just something that comes more naturally based on our functions for NFPs, I think.
Yes.
And we really create that space, and everyone looks at it like it's so emotionally exhausting and that we get really lost in it. Maybe on unhealthy levels, sure.
Yeah.
But I feel like for me, the one thing that really serves its purpose is being able to see all the facets of a situation or a person, to hold appreciation for them. And if we differ, at least I can be like, well, you know what, this is what I value, that's what you value, and I can respect that. But I also see the potential in all things.
Yes.
And it's like and it's nice because it's like you can go out into the world and you really see things differently, in a sense that you're not always at the effect of things anymore, if that makes sense. So if like someone cuts me off while I'm driving, I'm like, oh, maybe he's just had the worst day of his life. And like, I can take it personally. Whereas I feel like a lot of people get so lost in the things that they take them so personally, whereas we can kind of empathize or get on that level, where not a lot of types find that as natural.
Absolutely.
And I love that factor. I'm like, you know what? I love being around people that just get it that way.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. You just beautifully encapsulated what is, I just think, so wonderful about us NFPs. Not to toot our own horns, but like, you know, it's just like, but it's so true, because like when you actually we actually understand the human experience, and we understand the importance of human dignity and treating people with dignity and respect and holding space for that. And like, I think much, like you said, it comes much more naturally than any other type. And when you get really down to it, like when you really get on a deep level with people, like that's what you find out. It's like people just want to be loved and accepted for who they are. And, you know, and so like, regardless of, you know, whether or not they might make fun of the fact that we like might seem like naive, idealistic people, but like, but that's just like their cynical side speaking. You know, I and I, you know, I can be cynical too, but like, but there's still that like that flame of hope, and I think people really like that. And if you look at like a lot of the kind of not all, but like many of the visionary people who've like done really great things, like they had hope, you know, and they did it based on like a deep-seated value of like advancing like the human enterprise and treating people, like I said, with dignity and respect. And I think that you know, like some of the greatest like minds and thinkers and like revolutionaries were NFPs. I think they, you know, really, they've not that other types, again, in their own way, they definitely can change and revolutionize things. But like we do something, I think, that's particular to us, that's much more connected, I think, with the human experience.
I agree. I think you inspire that in people. It's like you could be the greatest leader and the best at what you do and for a company, but if you don't bring that human element of yourself, you're going to lack.
Absolutely.
And the NFPs see it. And you know what? If anything, if you don't embrace that part of yourself, you don't have our trust completely.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
For me to completely overly trust a person is if they've shown me a human element of themselves. Because I know if they mean something to me, I will create the space for that to happen. And that's really idealistic at the same time, because then when these people show up that way, we go, wow, like that's who you are.
Yes. I love that.
And we go off the next day like completely different. And that's one thing that screws us up, because people that I've been very close with, I archive and I see how they show up with different people.
Yes.
And wow, I feel very special because I see a side of you that no one sees. But at the same time, that's why we get the champion kind of tagline or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because it's like, we want them to bring those elements to everything they do.
Yes.
And I'm like, your life will be so much more rewarding if you can embrace those parts of your personality.
Oh.
Yeah. So
he's like,
totally.
I just like, yeah, no, but she like, or do you want to go?
Yeah. Yeah, this is like beautiful. It's like NF power hour. So yeah, like the reason why like NF is called the idealist is because they care about the humanity and people. And the thing is, with the NE, extroverted intuition, it sees the potential, and the FI is focusing on the individual, and so seeing the potential in individuals. And so you can have this very idealistic quality. And it's very lovely because you guys believe in people from the very depths of your heart, and you want them to show their true self. Like, you want their raw honesty as a person. You don't want their sugar-coated fakeness. You want their realness in its entirety. And you can make space for that darkness too, because you understand that it comes with the dark. So then you are like this endless well of holding space for the less flattering parts of people, which actually make them more flattering because it's the reality of them, which is beautiful. And you make them notice that.
No, it's I like Joyce, you beautifully said, and Alexa, you just get it. Like, I just feel the exact same way with people. Like, I've experienced it so much, like, in two ways. Like, first, like the just kind of when you get at such a close level with people, and you see, like, especially when you're starting to get to know somebody and you start seeing the different sides of them, sometimes it can be, you know, like, it can be difficult to let go of, like, the idealistic, like, aspect that you had about them. You know, that there's these other sides. I mean, we eventually like incorporate that and we hold space for that, but like it can be sometimes very jarring when we notice like a completely different behavior, especially like you said, in like maybe other group settings, whether it's in person or online or whatever, like where you see them act a certain way, and it's like, I this happens so much, right? I'm like, I know who you are. Like, why are you like being this way with this other person? Like, just be you. And it's like, I agree. It's like, it's so silly. Yes. Yeah. And I feel it's like, dang, like, I actually feel lucky that I actually have seen the real person. It's like, and it just makes me sad. It's like, I understand the reasons why, but it still makes me sad. Like, why can't you always be that way all the time? You know, because like that, seeing that vulnerability is just, and that realness is so beautiful. And that's why I want to go so deep with people, because I want to see you, like, not like some like facade of you. Like, I want to see the real you. And when I connect with those people, like on that deep level, I'm like, there you are. Yes. And it's beautiful. The good, bad, and ugly. I love all of it.
But how selfless is that to also want that person to share that with the world, not just us?
Yeah. Oh, I want that so bad. Like,
that's so unconditional.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think that's a big growth point for us as well, is that in turn, if that's how we, see other people, that we probably have this idealistic view of ourselves. And so if we fall short of that, we beat ourselves up about it.
Oh my gosh, endlessly.
And then I feel when I look inward and I can process, I'm like, whoa, I might think I'm this way, but I haven't quite reached that. So then to be more realistic and like a grounded sensor sense about it, and to understand that just because we have this vision of ourselves doesn't mean we're always on that way either. So as much as we want other people to be that way, sometimes we aren't always authentic to or true to ourselves.
Yes.
Instead of beating ourselves up about it, embrace those elements and know, like, everything that you are, that's just a gift and you need to use it. It's not something that's meant to be a heel in your life, and to just use it to your advantage and show up that way.
Yes.
The right people will gravitate to you.
Yeah, it's very like NF and NFP to like look for the highest way that people can express themselves, and it's like not only to you but to the world too. So like it's also NFJ like too, but NFJs, they go about it in a different way. So NFPs focus more on like that raw expression and bringing that raw expression to others and themselves too. But NFJs have a more like strategic approach to that human potential. So they'll try to like create an environment that optimizes fair treatment towards people and their entire humanity. And so like NFs just in general focus a lot on the dignity of human beings. And I know everyone does, but there's a special acuity to that NFs have. It's just like this predisposition to like, they cannot tune out of it. It's at the forefront of their mind.
Yes. The human is at the center of all of that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why FI users perceive at times that FE is a little manipulative, but it's a good place. It's just they're trying to alter the environment or the circumstance in order to promote that in someone else, which is just as good of an outcome for sure. But I think for us, we take a back seat to that because we don't want to push that per se.
Right.
Not that that's what FE users do. I think it's just a different way of how we want to cultivate the same thing.
Yeah, it's different ways at going about the NF, but I still like appreciate you guys with a common goal of NF. So yeah, any closing thoughts, guys? Anything you'd like to touch on?
I think the I've had this conversation with other NFPs. Like, we are truly sister types. Like, yes, there are some differences, but like at the end of the day, like we just are so similar. Sometimes it is very hard to tell us apart. Like you really have to know like the cognitive functions, like on your level, Joyce, to notice the little details, because otherwise like you'll miss them, because there's just a general behavioral attitude and even just thought process that we have that is just very similar. It's why like we get each other so well on such a deep level, and I think we just like naturally gravitate towards each other. So and they we like when you have any sort of relationship with an NFP, whether it's with two NFPs, whether it's romantic or friendship, I mean it's always like, it's like it feels home, like you're at home, like and somebody who truly just gets you and understands you. So it's a very safe space. It's very comforting.
Yeah, it's like home. I feel like ENFJs are my sister type too.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I watch one of Denzel Mensa's videos, I'm like, this guy thinks exactly like me. Like I like, it's very subtle differences. Like like it almost is like they're speaking the insides of my mind sometimes. So yeah, totally. And feeling like home. Yeah, I feel like out of all the temperaments, like NF, because I am an NF, like when I talk to another one, it can feel like I'm home, because I feel like they're focused on a certain thing that I'm focused on. And it feels like a part of my reality is validated, because they're talking about things I care about. So yeah, thank you guys for talking about things I care about with me. It's lovely. And so before we end it off, I'd just like to ask for both of your opinions on like INFPs and ENFPs that you know of in fiction or in real life. Maybe we can just contrast it at the end.
Okay, so like philosophers that I know, or at least that have supposedly been typed as ENFP and INFP. So Soren Kierkegaard is an INFP. Jacques Derrida is supposedly an ENFP. Oh, a great contrast: George Orwell, INFP; Aldous Huxley, ENFP, and Michael Pierce, again, I know I name drop him a lot, but Michael Pierce does such a great comparison of the differences. If you read their books, 1984 for George Orwell, INFP, and A Brave New World for Aldous Huxley, ENFP, you see the differences, because in 1984, like it is, there's an explicitly good bad. So there's an explicitly bad like person, an antagonist in the story. And there's like an explicitly good person. So it's very kind of like how an FI Dom would kind of see things in a little bit more black and white, like this is good and this is bad. But in Brave New World, the supposedly evil person, he's actually not like, it's very ambiguous, because he's not like doing explicitly anything bad. Like he's not committing some sort of genocide, or he's not he's not like setting up systems that control people's minds or whatever. What he's done is he's like genetically engineered human beings to like basically rid the humanity of them. So like he genetically modifies human beings to like be in a certain class of people. So like lower class, higher class, whatever, working class. So it's not like, again, it's not explicit. It's very ambiguous that like the morality in the story of Brave New World is like I said, it's not as clear cut. So that really kind of shows the differentiation between like NEFI in Aldous Huxley and FINE in George Orwell.
Yeah, you know a lot more about that than I do, because I don't. It's probably because I watch a movie and then I go off and do another thing. But, and I don't really know the types of many of the fictional characters that I listen to, but I will say that I do dabble and read a lot of poetry And I do find that there are a lot of NF writers that I gravitate to, a lot of INFJs as well, that I just love reading their stuff. But yeah, I don't really know any fictional characters off the top of my head that really, I'm bad at that. Like even recently, Susan was just like, name a fictional character and then I'll tell you who you remind me of. And I'm like, what fictional character do I even like? Because like, there's so many, and then I can't even think off the top of my head of just a significant movie that will capture like my favorite, because I think that changes for me so much. Maybe with an INFP it will shift, or it doesn't shift as much, but for me it's just like whatever's right for that moment and I can connect to it makes sense. And then, you know, a week later it could be something else. That's why I don't really have like a favorite song or favorite movie or
Yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting. My ENFP has the same problem. Like, whenever you ask her, like, what is your favorite movie? Like, she cannot answer. She's like, I have, like, my favorites change from time to time. Like, I can't give you an answer.
It's so.
But again, I think it's that whole SI thing, you know, like we concretize our favorite things, you know, as INFPs. And so like, you know, so that closes things off. Yeah.
Really interesting. Yeah. Alexa, do you have any people that you know that are ENFP versus INFP? You can just know the ENFP side too. That's fine.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't think, I mean, I don't really know anyone outside of Type Twitter. I don't even know if I have a lot of INFP friends. I have a lot of SFP. But if I were to compare like even just the INFPs I know online versus the ENFPs, I see just a nice cohesiveness of the ability to understand, relate to, and develop things. It's really interesting, and like thoughts and ways of being, having them validated, like Cristian was saying earlier. So as for the differences, I know when I do talk in detail with one, like I do have a friend that's an INFP, it's always about like the most up and current lived experience with this person. Whereas I might talk about my most recent thing that I'm feeling, but then I relate it to like 10 other things that I could possibly be feeling and why I'm feeling that way. So it's really nice to have that kind of relationship with another INFP, because it's like you said, it's like home and you feel very understood, and it's a great way to kind of organically create new ideas and understand like the reasons why we're thinking and feeling this kind of similar things in a sense. Yeah,
it's very true. I always feel at home with NFs too. Like Heidi Parib says, we need each other, and like it's really beautiful the things that we create while we hang out together, and just the safe spaces we create to be ourselves. Because sometimes NFs can be sensitive to a lack of humanity in things that other people don't see. So sometimes like we'll voice when we see it, and then no one will understand it. But when we're with other NFs, like it's more likely that they'll get it. And so it's beautiful. And so thank you guys for giving me an hour of your time and making me feel at home like you guys so wonderfully do. And I appreciate you guys holding space for the dark sides of other human beings so that they can fully embrace who they are instead of rejecting a part of themselves. So you help them wholly integrate themselves instead of fragmenting themselves. So you really, really help them accept their humanness. And so thank you for bringing your skill of making others accept their humanness. And yeah.
That's not me. That's awesome.
I'm gonna keep this in just to show how a lack of TE, like you can have TE, but you can also not have it in high stack when there's noise. So yeah, it's a very good demonstration of not being a TJ. So yeah, very cool. And so thank you for just being, you know, the wonderful selves that you are, promoting the authenticity in the people around you. You bring a very valuable tool set to the world. And I thank you, you know, on behalf of the NFs, and just like, I thank you for all the work you're doing for humanity. And so, and thank you viewers for watching this far. I hope this NF talk has given you warm fuzzies. And I'll see you guys next week or in the next video. And so bye y'all. Bye.
Bye, guys.